Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, Predictive Index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to Talent Optimization with Tracy Shirk. Today we are talking about how do you create your dream team, and specifically how do you design them. And so with me today, I have Jeanine Woyner, and Jeanine is with Blackhawk Bank, and she's going to share with us a little bit about her journey with Predictive Index and specifically how she has gone through some of the trials and tribulations of creating some really strong dream teams inside of the bank. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, I'm thrilled you're here.
Great.
So how do you define a dream team?
Well, when I think of a dream team, I think of employees that need to work together and they need to be engaged while they're working, but that can be tricky, right? Because most teams are made up of people that are very different. They have different skill sets, they have different backgrounds, they have different needs, and sometimes there can be conflict. So what you want to do is you want to create a team of people where you're going to be picking people to be on that team using the strengths, their individual strengths that they do have in order to make that team better and stronger together.
Great. So what I'm hearing you say is we want to use individual strengths, but then we also know that when we put a team together, that team is stronger than any individual contributor.
Absolutely.
And how do you create that dream team so that it's actually executing on what the organization needs it to execute on?
There's a few steps that I take. The first thing I do is I will talk to the leader of that team. And I'll find out what their strategic vision is for the team. I'll find out what their specific goals are for the team. That's a great place to start. And then the next step is then you have to look at the current members of the team. And I do kind of a gap analysis. I will use the PI tool. Actually, there's a specific tool with MPI that I love to use, and it's the team discovery tool. Mm-hmm. There's a circle, and it breaks out to the people that you put into your team, and it lets you know where their strengths are.
Right.
You don't focus on weaknesses. At this point, we really don't care about weakness. It's more about the strength. There's quadrants in this circle, and you want to make sure that there's good balance in that team so that you have all those quadrants represented. So that's the next step. And then you go out and you search for people. And of course, at Blackhawk, we do use the PI for hiring. So anybody that is interviewing with us is asked to take a PI.
Right.
And that's how we get the basic knowledge about them and what their needs and behaviors are and what their work personality is going to be like. And then we can see if they fit into that team. And that's really the very simplistic view of that process.
Right. So that makes a lot of sense. So what I'm hearing you saying is you're essentially looking at it and saying, okay, this team needs to execute XYZ strategy. And then we make sure we have the right people in that team based on that specific strategy that we're looking to execute. And one of the things that you had just talked about is, hey, there's these different quadrants. And then within those different quadrants, you're looking at, do we have the things there? So I thought I would just name what the different quadrants are. So the first quadrant is innovation and agility. And that's essentially that individual that's going to create the pathway. They're going to create the new product, right?
And they're a lot of times they're your out-of-the-box thinkers.
Yes.
And really into that innovation and new ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got your results and discipline folks.
Yep. They're your drivers.
They sure are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got your process and precision people.
Your detail people. Everything's got to be done the right way. Rules have to be followed. And yep, those are those people.
And then we have our teamwork and our employee experience folks.
Those are our warm, fuzzy people.
Yeah.
I love warm, fuzzy.
I know.
Every team has to have one.
They do.
Yes.
They do. And I think what's so interesting with this when we look at it from this perspective is, all right, based on the strategy that we need to implement, we need certain individuals within these. And there's times where I think when you're designing dream teams, you've got that outlier that doesn't really fit. What do you do with them?
Well, sometimes you move them to a different team. Sometimes you just work on them. So you can coach and you can mentor and try and improve some of those skills. But the one thing that I've learned through PI is I always tell my employees that their PIs are all beautiful because it's who they are.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to change somebody.
Right.
But you can change tasks within your team that can speak to that individual or outlier where their strengths are. You can just change some of the tasks, and it really helps create just a better working environment for everybody.
Yeah. And I think with that, so we have to be self-aware, right? So based on what is the task that needs to be executed, we need to be self-aware. And sometimes we need to shift into that. And I think that's one of the beauties is we can see where do we need to shift based on the strategy that's being executed. The other thing that I see so often, and I'm guessing you see this too, is that individual that's the outlier. Many times I find them as the balancer for that team.
You're right. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Right. So you could have a team that's all results and discipline and they're super task focused. But if you didn't have that like teamwork and employee experience person to kind of pull them all together, they would never know what anyone is doing outside of the office, who their kids are, where they like to go on vacation because they're so focused on the task.
Absolutely. I've had teams like that and very task-driven people. And then you've got my warm and fuzzy person, and the task-driven people will all tell you warm and fuzzy is my favorite person in the team.
Right. Because they're bringing them all together.
They care. They truly care.
And it's not that results and discipline folks don't care at all.
Right.
It's just they're driven in a different way.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that there's different teams where you need lots more warm and fuzzy, right? Or you need more results and discipline, or you need more individuals that are those innovation folks. And that's where, hey, where are we? What is our strategy? And how does our team fit that? That's where the fun comes in of creating that dream team.
It does. And a lot of times it helps to, you can have a team that's just not functioning well because there's animosity within the team. And a lot of times, by using the team discovery tool, it helps you sometimes realign things so that you can make the team more cohesive. They'll enjoy working together more, they'll be more efficient, and their outcomes will be better.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a story or a time where you've done that?
I do. I have a story. It's about our commercial banking team. So we're Blackhawk Bank. So we're a bank. We're a community bank. So we have a very strong culture in the bank. And our clients are actually a part of our culture. So one of our favorite sayings is, we want to have a relationship for life. We want to be your bank for life. So it's not about just getting a deal done, signing the paperwork, pay your bill on time, and everybody walks away happy. It doesn't work that way for us. We want a relationship with you. So our commercial bankers, it used to be just a big team, let's say 16 commercial bankers. And they were all pretty much housed in the same office and near each other. And they got together once a week for meetings. But there was a lot of competition in that team. There was a lot of infighting. So when you think about commercial bankers, they're a lot like salespeople. And that's a very typical type of personality for a salesperson, right? Is to be very individually driven. And a good salesperson is driven and to get the sale and to get it done. And I found that that's what was happening. There was so much competition. Everybody wanted to be number one on the list and have the most loans closed or the best loans closed, that they were forgetting about our bank's mission and our bank's vision and our bank's culture about doing what's best for the client and making them a client for life. So they weren't focusing on the relationships, which is number one priority for our commercial bankers. They were just trying to get the deals done. So we came up with an idea of taking the big commercial banking group and breaking it up into smaller groups. So we started by looking at everybody's individual PI, using the team discovery tool to find out who would make a good team, because you wanted a warm and fuzzy person in there using, the teamwork person who's going to really make the client feel welcome and happy and heard and valued. And then you wanted the results and discipline person that was going to kind of drive the sale to the finish line. And then you wanted the innovation and agility person, because not every deal is easy. Some of them are complicated. And so you need that person that's willing to think outside the box. And then, of course, you needed the process person who's going to make sure that all the paperwork is done right. And, when you come in and get audited, the FDIC is going to be happy with all your paperwork. So we put together 4 teams like that, and they all got different names. We named one person a leader. Again, through the PI, we determined who would make the best leader. And here's the best part. So when they were the big commercial team, they had individual bonus goals. So they had a salary structure plus a bonus. Well, when we went to the pod system, we made a big, healthy portion of their bonus based on how well their individual pod was doing, not just on their individual. Right. So it really made them focus on their team and supporting one another and using each individual person's strengths to make that team better. We didn't care about their weaknesses. And here's the other great thing. There's 2 great things that came out of it. One is we saw that the weaknesses, I hate to talk about weaknesses, but we saw them slowly decline, because when they're working with a group of subject matter experts, if you will, in this group, they were turning some of those weaknesses around. They were learning every day, every month. They were learning more and more. So they were increasing their skill on those areas that they weren't as strong. So you see the team over time just getting stronger and stronger and feeding off of each other's strengths. We also saw bonuses go way up, because they weren't competing against individuals anymore. There wasn't infighting. There wasn't, sometimes I would even say, bullying towards each other. Yeah. But there was teamwork and support and wanting the team to succeed. And so we saw those 2 things happen, and it was amazing. And it's done so well that, we've actually been able to add a 5th team now. So it's really, really working for us. So that's one great example.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Isn't this fun from both an executive lens and an HR lens, when you can look at it and say, our bonuses have gone beyond what our budgeted plan is because our sales have?
Absolutely.
It's so fantastic.
It's a good problem to have, right?
It sure is. It sure is. And I love how when you created that team, you were specifically looking at what is the strategy that we need to implement. And you know what? We're not going to focus on weaknesses, but we're going to be that strength-based organization. We're going to coach based on those strengths, because when we don't have that grind that, I got to do all these things. And you know what? This is something that Jeanine loves to do. Hey, Jeanine, do you want to do this thing? You're like, yes, I love that. And you're like, oh, good. I hated that thing. Now I can go focus on the thing I love that you hate. Right?
Absolutely. And that's what we saw happen. It was a really good transformation.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so in a way, you kind of talked a little bit about this. So do you do a fit gap analysis with staff in your organization to ensure that they are in the right fit for the right role and on the right team?
Yeah, so I've been with the organization about 4.5 years, and that's something that I've started working on in the last year, because we've been growing at this exponential rate. We've had to do a lot of restructuring just because the old ways, the old departments didn't work. We had to create new departments. And so you're not always sure who's going to fit in a new department, or once you restructure a department, is it going to work? So we've been working on that slowly, department by department, looking at the gap analysis to make sure the teams are working. And we've done some transfers. We've transferred some people from one department to the other. It's very important to us that we retain our talent. So we're not looking to say, okay, if your strength does not work in this department, it would work in this department. We'd much rather do that. We don't want to say, you're out the door. It's not who we are or what we're about. So we've done a lot of that. I do hate to say it. We've had a couple demotions that we've done. We had people in leadership roles that really shouldn't have been in leadership roles.
Right.
We've done it very respectfully and with generally no loss in income. It's really just a different role that they have.
So I have a question about that.
Yes.
So when you did that movement based on what their strengths are, were they actually more engaged after the move?
Not initially.
Right.
What's the opposite of a honeymoon period?
Right.
I don't know what the word is, but there's about a mourning period.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's a mourning period.
Yeah.
For about 3 months, I noticed. And there's a lot of coaching and mentoring and talking and positive feedback and just positive affirmation to that employee of why the move was made or why the change was made. And so they're not taking it personally. They're not internalizing it. You want them to talk about their feelings. But after that mourning period was over, they just absolutely blossomed. Both the cases that I'm thinking of in my mind, they absolutely blossomed. And they are so happy in their new roles. And I promised them they would be. And so it makes me as a leader feel good that I was able to live up to the promise that I made them, that they would ultimately be much happier. And they both are.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
It's painful, though, in the beginning.
It is. Yeah, it is. I think anyone listening in from an HR or an executive standpoint knows that those demotions or terminations are like the worst days ever.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Fantastic. So it's so good to hear how you're utilizing that fit gap analysis, and because every time we bring PI into an organization, there's a cleanup period. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, okay, we have this easy button now and this tool that's really helping us see individuals in ways we don't have to wait years to do that, and we've got this beautiful match score that will tell us based on the roles, oh my gosh, this person may be a great fit for this role. And you're like, I never thought about that. And neither did they.
Right. And, another great way to use it is when I first came into Blackhawk, there were some departments that they weren't exactly getting along.
Right.
So the PI is a great tool. I would do kind of like a afternoon session where I'd get all the members of the team together and we would go through each other's PIs and we would talk about it and we would kind of lay ourselves out on the table and show each other who we were so that we could show each other what our needs were. Tracy, this is how Jeanine needs to hear things.
Right.
And you don't always deliver it that way. So when you're talking to Jeanine, maybe you can deliver it this way.
Right.
When you're talking to Susie, you can just deliver it any way you want. Because Susie, it just rolls off her shoulder. Jeanine is a little more sensitive in this area. So it's about learning how to communicate with each other, how they need to be communicated to. And so that was another great way that we utilized the PI tool. It did help several teams work out some dilemmas that they had and just learn who each other were, other than who their kids were and what their dog's name was. And it went deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for who their kids are and their dogs' names, our teamwork and employee experience folks are going to do that naturally.
Sure.
But our process and precision folks are not, right? And I think another thing that's really fun when we look at this is, when we create those dream teams, if I'm bringing someone on that is, let's say, a process and precision person, and I'm an innovation and agility person, which, by the way, I am. Mm-hmm. So I'm this innovation and agility person, but I know that I fall down on processes and details. And so I need someone on my team to ensure that happens. That also means that there's probably going to be some friction at first because we communicate very differently. So, I will pull out my management strategy guide before I sit down, and we do it every 3 months just to say, how are things going, and more often if needed. But hey, how am I doing on these areas with how you need to be communicated with? And it completely changes the relationship, almost like that. It's just one of those things that is really fun in creating those dream teams because they still need a little bit of maintenance.
You're absolutely right. And in my department specifically, we still do an annual evaluation, but I do a quarterly sit down with each of my team members. And those are the exact questions that I ask. Yeah. How am I doing?
Right.
How am I helping you be more successful? Am I putting up any roadblocks for you? Am I communicating the way you need me to communicate? And I try and create this environment where they feel free to talk to me about it and not, a lot of times if your boss says something like that to you, you're like, oh, I don't want to be honest. But over time, they will trust you.
Yeah.
You have to do it gradually and slowly, but as long as you establish trust, then you have this great relationship where you can have that give and take.
Absolutely. And that gets into that self-awareness as well of,
right.
Hey, did you realize what we're talking about that's on the back of your t-shirt, you really need to be self-aware of to step
right.
into.
And I think you talk about self-awareness. Now we also have weekly meetings as a team. And I notice that sometimes if I say something, I can actually, so I have 3 team members and I can look at one of my team members' face and realize, okay, they just didn't like what I said. And I can think for a few seconds, what did I just say? And how did that hurt that person? Or, just by body language, you actually, over time, you become more self-aware. The deeper you get to know your coworkers, your employees, if you're a supervisor, you just naturally become more self-aware.
Thank you so much for this conversation and how we're creating dream teams, because it's really the strategy to, what's the strategy that the team is going to execute on? All right, who do we already have? Where do we need to shuffle the deck a bit to develop and really implement that strategy? And where do we need to stretch and be self-aware to do that? So I'm super curious, because we always close our podcast with, what's one key takeaway for our HR listeners based on what we've talked about today?
I guess one of the key takeaways that I think everybody should have is, that you hire people for their experience and their skills, but don't forget about their needs.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget about what they need as an individual to feel happy at work, to feel fulfilled, to look forward to coming into work every day. So just remember that. That's really important. And everybody has different needs.
Yeah.
No 2 people are the same.
No, they're not. And we have to, kind of create different pathways for them within that. And so what's one actionable takeaway for executives listening in today?
It's kind of the same message.
Yeah.
It is the same message. Make sure your people underneath you understand what your vision is, what your strategic goals are. Make sure you're doing a really good job communicating that, and make sure they're aligning their department or their team's goals and vision to what the CEO or the president, to what their vision is.
Mm-hmm.
And then figure out how to get there together.
Yes.
And don't forget about those needs, those individual needs that everybody has.
That's such great, so essentially what I hear you saying is you've got to create a people strategy that is that bridge between the business strategy and the business results. And that people strategy may be owned by HR, but it's really everyone on the leadership team that's responsible for it.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. You had mentioned earlier a little bit about the culture at Blackhawk Bank. And one of the things, so I've been a client of Blackhawk Bank, and we actually switched from another bank because of that philosophy that you have. And one of the things that I absolutely love is how you've built that all throughout every single department head and lead. I know when I first switched to Blackhawk, your director of marketing, Stephanie Meyer, actually took 2 hours to walk through a marketing and a digital, marketing plan with me. And how do I, what's SEO and how do I use it? And
I remember when she taught me what SEO is. So, so we have this philosophy, when I talk about relationships and being your bank for life, it's not just about opening up an account or giving you a loan. It's about making you as a business owner as successful as you can be. So we're doing something that, to my knowledge, there's no other community banks doing, but we want to give you all the tools necessary to be successful. So if you're a small company and you don't have an HR person, you maybe have an office manager, somebody in the office who's kind of performing those functions, But then all of a sudden you get faced with a tough issue.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens. Every business owner goes through it with an employee. Something will happen and you just don't know what to do. And you go online and you Google it and there's 3 different opinions. Well, if you're a client of Blackhawk Bank, you get me.
Right.
You get to call me up. I have over 20 years of experience. I'm an SPHR. So I have a certification in HR and I can help you work through those problems. And if I can't solve it for you, I can get you the person that will solve you. Sometimes they're bigger problems where you may need an attorney. I have lots of peers in the community that are willing to help you and get you what you need. But for the most part, I can help you and it costs you nothing. And all you have to do is send me an email or pick up the phone. Marketing does the same thing. If you're having a cash flow issue or you're having a balance sheet issue, you can talk to our chief credit officer. You can talk to our CFO, and we can come out and we can work out a strategy with you on how to improve things. It costs you nothing because we're invested in your success. So the more successful you are, the happier we are. And let's be honest, banks are in business to make money too, right? So if you're successful, we're successful.
Right. Absolutely. And that goes right back to, we're going to create this dream team. And at the core of that is what the culture is. And we so often call that, the heart, right? Because that is, what is the individual's personal values and does that align with the organizational values, when we're hiring? And guess what? That doesn't, you need to have that person on your team. That's typically the teamwork quadrant, right? That will be able to go and do that, because if you're all results disciplined, they're not going to want to spend extra time, because that doesn't mean that they're getting that additional sales. So,
right. And I'll tell you something my president of the bank often says. He says that he can teach anybody to do anything in the bank, but he can't teach an employee how to care.
Right.
That's something you have or you don't. And that's a great way. The PI is a great tool to show us who's coming in with that natural talent of actually caring about people.
Right. Thank you so much for being with us today. And if you are looking to learn a little bit more about Jeanine and Blackhawk Bank, her LinkedIn profile is in the show notes along with the website link for Blackhawk Bank. And, if you're sitting here listening and going, man, Tracy, I would love to have a one-on-one talent strategy session with you, and I want to know what my PI is, we have links in the show notes for both of those. So you can take your Predictive Index behavioral assessment and learn about you. You're going to get your results immediately. That takes about 5 minutes. And then if you're interested in, hey, I want to know what does our team look like? There's information on that as well. So Jeanine, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.